The docking concourse of Orion spaceport was a river of voices, neon signs, and the sound of bootsteps on polished metal floors. Above, the towering vaulted ceilings stretched into the haze of industrial vents, where maintenance drones darted like metallic insects between exposed conduits. Beneath them, thousands of people moved in currents. Merchants with hover carts, refugees carrying bundles, and uniformed personnel with straight backs. Their paths were clear, their destinations certain. Through the chaos stumbled a small girl, a blind orphan whose existence seemed insignificant in this world of intergalactic hustle. Her name was Mira. Her fingers brushed the railing, and the rusted pipe she called a cane tapped softly against the cold, metallic floor. The pipe was wrapped in frayed insulation tape at one end, the black residue staining her palms. She could not have been more than 12, her thin frame swallowed by a patchwork coat far too large for her. Her dark glasses, the only thing that kept her hidden from the pitying gazes of others, shielded her cloudy, scarred eyes from prying stares. Mira moved with a quiet precision, guided only by the sounds around her, the clatter of boots, the hum of machinery, the voices that cut through the thick air like knives. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, a group of 4 cadets, freshly minted from the first-year academy, materialized from the crowd. Their spotless uniforms were stark against the dirt-streaked faces of the people who lived in the lower levels of the station. They circled her like predators, drawing a line between her and the rest of the world. "Look at that," one of them sneered. "Station rats get bolder every cycle." The tallest of the cadets, his insignia gleaming brightly on his chest, stood a few steps ahead of the others. His voice cut through the air, harsh and mocking. "Hey, you, how do you even get past the checkpoints, rat?" Mira didn't respond. Her knuckles whitened around the rusted pipe as she adjusted her course. She was used to this, used to the cruelty, used to the isolation. The insult was nothing new. The crowd flowed around her, indifferent, lost in the rhythm of their lives. No one cared enough to intervene. The cadets were closing in now, their laughter sharp, cutting into the space around her like a blade. She could hear their footsteps growing louder, their breath quickening in anticipation. The tallest one stepped directly in her path. "Hey, I'm talking to you?" His voice was louder now, impatient, as though Mira owed him some kind of answer. He moved closer, his boot tapping against her cane. The hollow sound rang out in the silence between them. Mira flinched, pulling her cane back and stepping sideways, trying to maintain her balance in the midst of the growing tension. She could feel his presence, the heavy, purposeful tread of his boots, the subtle shift in the air as he moved closer. "No, no," the cadet muttered, kneeling down in front of her. He reached out, grabbing her dark glasses, tearing them off her face with a swift, cruel motion. The sudden exposure burned her. Mira's eyes, swollen with cataracts and scarred from years of blindness, stung as the recycled air rushed across her exposed skin. Her face jerked up reflexively, and for the first time in years she felt utterly vulnerable. She had no protection. The world went silent for a moment. Her breath was sharp and ragged, every pulse in her body amplified in the dark, empty space she now inhabited. She could hear them before she could even process the looks on their faces, the intake of breath, the subtle shift in their body language. Disgust. One of the cadets, one with a shaved head, laughed, a sound that grated on her sensitive ears. "She's faking it," he said, his voice filled with mockery. "Can see just fine, probably never even blind." The girl stiffened, her body tensing with the weight of his words. She could hear the mockery dripping from every syllable, feel the burn of their stares against her skin. She had learned to live in the darkness, to navigate by sound and touch. But in this moment, in this unfeeling world, she felt as if she was being consumed by it. The cadet with the tallest frame grinned, tossing her glasses onto the floor a few feet away. "Get them back on, freak." Mira dropped to her knees, her hands trembling as she scrambled to find her glasses. The smooth, polished floor offered no clues, no texture, nothing to guide her as she searched desperately. Her fingers brushed across nothing but empty space. Her panic rose like a tide, choking her chest. "Please," she whispered over and over, her voice barely audible over the sounds of the concourse. "Please, I ca." Suddenly, a harsh crack echoed across the space. The cadet's boot slammed down onto her cane, splintering it into 2 pieces. The sound was deafening, like a gunshot to her already fragile world. The vibration shot up her arm, severing her last lifeline. She stumbled, her body unable to compensate for the loss of balance. She fell to the ground, landing hard on her palms, the pain shooting up her arms. But no one stopped. No one cared. The world moved on without her. Restricted areas are restricted, the cadet said flatly, as though this act of cruelty was nothing more than a casual statement. Then, with a final mocking laugh, he added, "You don't even have a family to stand up for you. No one cares if you're here or not." The voices around her grew distant as they walked away, drifting back into the crowd. Their laughter mingled with the noise of the station as Mira remained kneeling, broken and alone on the cold floor. But then something shifted. A figure moved through the crowd, cutting a path through the sea of people. He wasn't like the others. His coveralls were worn, stained with grease and oil, his face weathered, a network of scars crisscrossing his hands. Caleb Vance, Maintenance Division. His rough hands, scarred from years of working in the lower levels, reached down and lifted the broken piece of her cane. He held it in his hands for a moment, feeling the corrosion and rust before he placed it carefully aside. He didn't speak, didn't say anything to her. He simply reached into his tool satchel, dug through the debris of his tools, and pulled out something clean, something perfect. A polished, smooth tube of alloy, strong and lightweight, designed for a repair he'd been saving for an important task. But now it was in his hands, and he knew exactly what to do with it. He placed it gently in Mira's trembling fingers. For a moment, confusion crossed her face as she held the strange object. But as her fingers ran along its surface, a quiet shock filled her. It was solid. It was real. It was strong. It was everything she needed. The cane wasn't a symbol of her brokenness anymore. It was a new beginning. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible, but Caleb heard it. He nodded, his weathered face betraying no emotion, but there was something in his eyes, something soft, something human, that told her he understood. The station's loudspeaker crackled, breaking the moment. "Warning, Sector C will sterilize in 20 minutes. All unauthorized citizens evacuate immediately." Mira's shoulders stiffened. "I have to go," she said, her voice trembling. Caleb glanced at the nearest exit, then back at her. He knew the rules, knew the stakes. "You won't make it," he said. "Not through the checkpoints." "I have to try," she insisted, her grip tightening around the new cane. Without saying another word, Caleb took a step forward. His jaw tightened with resolve. "I'll help you," he said. And so they moved together as the countdown to sterilization began. The real storm was just starting. The station's loudspeaker echoed across the concourse, a mechanical voice that seemed to reverberate through the air like a death knell. "Sterilization will commence in 20 minutes. All unauthorized citizens evacuate immediately." Mira felt the words scrape against her, a cold chill seeping into her bones. She had heard the warnings before, heard the sharp urgency in the station's automated voice, but it had always been someone else's problem, always someone else's emergency. This time it was her turn. The crowd moved in all directions, flowing toward the exits like a river, but Mira and Caleb were already turning away from the main path. Caleb's footsteps were quick, purposeful, cutting through the crowd. Mira kept close behind him, guided by the sound of his movements, the tapping of her new alloy cane tapping a steady rhythm on the floor as they slipped toward a lesser-used service corridor. The air around them buzzed with nervous energy, a mix of people rushing to comply with the evacuation orders and the growing anxiety of those two afraid to leave. Distant alarms began to wail in the background, blending with the voices of the crowd. Mira could sense the tension in Caleb's movements. He had no intention of running to safety like the others. He wasn't going to abandon her. "Stay close," Caleb said over his shoulder, his voice low but firm. "We're going to take the maintenance shaft. It's not far from here." Mira's heart pounded, the adrenaline from the escape sinking into her chest. She had never ventured into the maintenance sectors of the station, too dangerous, too hidden. Yet it was her only option now. Caleb paused at an unmarked door tucked behind a row of food dispensers, its metal surface dented and worn. Mira stepped forward, and Caleb opened the door with a quiet grunt. It creaked on its hinges, the space beyond cloaked in shadows. "After you," Caleb said. Mira hesitated just for a second. She could feel the coldness of the air shift as they entered the small passageway. The scent of oil and machinery was thick here, the metallic tang of fuel and the occasional hum of engines overhead. The walls were a patchwork of wiring and old panels, some of them flickering with low light, others dark and silent. As Caleb entered the corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoed off the walls. He moved swiftly but cautiously, his steps measured as if he knew exactly where to go. Mira followed, trusting in the rhythm of the sound, her cane tapping against the uneven floor, guiding her through the dark. The door behind them closed with a soft hiss, sealing off the concourse. A loud, urgent voice echoed in the hallway. "Attention! All personnel must evacuate immediately. All unauthorized personnel will be detained." The message repeated, but it was distant now as they moved deeper into the belly of the station. Mira's pulse quickened as they pressed on, the air growing colder and damper with each step they took. She couldn't see the danger that loomed ahead, but she could feel it. She could feel Caleb's unease, the tension in his shoulders as he moved ahead of her. His hand brushed against the metal walls as if he was guiding himself, but Mira knew he was listening for something, waiting for the wrong sound, the wrong moment. "How much farther?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, even though the space around them was silent except for their footsteps. "Not far," Caleb replied, his tone gruff but steady. "Keep moving." Mira nodded, although Caleb couldn't see it. She had no choice but to trust him. She focused on the sound of his boots, keeping pace as best as she could. They reached a junction ahead where the corridor split into two. Caleb paused, listening intently before turning left. Then came the unmistakable hum of a drone, its quiet whirring growing louder as it neared their location. Mira froze, her heart stopping for a moment. "Drone," Caleb muttered under his breath. He glanced at her, his hand reaching out to steady her, his eyes scanning the dimly lit hallway. "Stay down, don't make a sound." Mira could feel the air shift as the drone passed. The metallic screech of its sensors made her blood run cold. It hovered just above their heads, its lights flickering against the dark walls. She could hear the faint mechanical noise as it scanned, its mechanical voice droning. "Unauthorized personnel detected. Stand down immediately." Mira bit back, the panic rising in her throat. She clenched her fists around the cane, trying to steady herself. Caleb was motionless, every muscle tensed. The drone's sensors swept across the space, but it was only a matter of time before it detected them. The maintenance shaft they were in wasn't meant for civilians, and certainly not for anyone trying to escape a station-wide lockdown. It was a labyrinth of old equipment and forgotten passageways, with too many open spaces that could be scanned by the drone's high-tech sensors. Seconds felt like hours as the drone hovered above them. Mira's hands shook, but she forced herself to stay still, listening to Caleb's breathing. He was just as tense as she was, maybe more. He could hear the drone's progress, its increasing proximity, but he made no move. Then, just as the drone began to hover above them, it turned away. Mira let out a shaky breath, the tension in her body finally releasing as the drone's sound faded into the distance. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Close," he muttered, glancing down at her, "but we're still good." "Thanks," she whispered, the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "No problem," Caleb said quietly, but his gaze didn't linger on her. His eyes were already scanning the path ahead. "Let's keep moving." They pressed on through the maintenance tunnels, the low rumble of the station's reactors echoing through the walls. The hum of life support systems, the faint echo of distant machinery. It all seemed so far away from the world above, where the station's rich elite and military personnel went about their daily lives. But here, in these dark, winding passageways, things were different. Here, no one cared who you were or where you came from. It was about survival. As they reached another junction, Caleb slowed, checking for any signs of movement. Mira could hear his breath, steady and focused. His presence was a rock in the chaos around them. "We're almost there," Caleb said, his voice low. "One more section to go." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, fast and purposeful. The sharp click of boots against metal grew louder. Mira's heart leapt into her throat. "Someone's coming," she whispered urgently. Caleb cursed under his breath. His eyes darted from side to side, his hands moving quickly as he scanned for cover. He grabbed Mira's arm, guiding her toward an alcove at the side of the corridor. They huddled there, the cold walls pressing against them. Caleb held his breath, listening to the footsteps approaching. Mira's pulse raced as she waited in the tense silence. A few moments later, the figure appeared, a security officer walking briskly down the hallway, scanning the area with sharp, practiced eyes. "Stay quiet," Caleb warned, his grip tightening around her arm. The officer moved closer, his boots clicking methodically against the floor. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, and she felt the weight of Caleb's presence beside her. The officer passed them, just a few feet away, unaware of the two figures hiding in the shadows. Caleb exhaled, waiting for the echo of footsteps to fade before he dared move again. When the coast was clear, he pulled Mira from the alcove, and they quickly continued down the maintenance tunnel, faster now. The sound of a distant alarm rattled through the corridors, mixing with the low hum of the station. Time was running out. They had to make it to the shaft before the sterilization began, and even if they did, they still had to survive the way out. The stakes were rising, and every step forward brought them closer to an uncertain future. But one thing was clear: they were in this together now, and they were not turning back. As they approached the final junction, Caleb's hand gripped her shoulder tightly, his eyes scanning the corridor ahead. "We're not alone," he muttered. A pair of red lights blinked in the darkness. A new danger loomed. The maintenance corridor ended abruptly at a heavy bulkhead door. Caleb's hand hovered over the control panel, his fingers brushing the worn buttons, feeling the vibration of the station's systems beneath his fingertips. Beyond the door lay Section 12, the route they hoped would lead to safety. But the blinking red lights on the panel warned them. Access was restricted. Only officers and authorized personnel could pass. Mira's small hand gripped the polished alloy cane tightly. Its weight was comforting now, a reminder that she could navigate the world even in darkness. She felt Caleb's tension beside her, his brow furrowed, jaw tight. Every second counted. Caleb muttered, "If we can override this, we might make it out before the sterilization gas floods Section C." The lights above flickered as the station systems began an automated lockdown. A low hum became a rising mechanical roar as vent covers sealed, air pressure shifted, and alarms shrieked in distant corridors. "Quarantine protocol initiated. All unauthorized personnel will be contained immediately," the mechanical voice intoned. Mira froze, her fingers tightened around the cane. She had navigated the vents for months, hidden from the station's surveillance, always alone. But now the danger was immediate, unstoppable, and alive. "Caleb, what if we can't?" she whispered, voice trembling. "We can," he replied firmly. "We don't have a choice." His eyes scanned the bulkhead and the panel. His hands moved quickly over the keys, entering sequences he didn't fully recognize. Old codes, improvised overrides, improvisation that only a human with years of experience in forgotten corners of the station could attempt. The panel beeped. A green light blinked once, then died. Caleb cursed under his breath. The door remained locked. "We'll have to find another way," he muttered, scanning the corridor. From behind, a faint whirring grew louder. The unmistakable sound of drones. Multiple drones, their sensors sweeping, searching, scanning for unauthorized movement. Caleb pulled Mira behind a support beam, the shadows swallowing them. "They'll detect us if we move too soon," Caleb whispered. "We have to wait for the rhythm, the patrol cycle, watch the vents, watch the light." Mira crouched, listening. Her blind eyes could see nothing, but her ears absorbed every detail. The whine of the drones' motors, the soft hiss of vent air, the distant footsteps echoing in the metallic corridors. She could anticipate their patterns. Caleb exhaled sharply. "Okay, move on my signal." The two waited silent. Time slowed. Every second stretched like an eternity, each heartbeat a drum of rising tension. Then Caleb's hand shot forward, pressing lightly on Mira's shoulder. He gestured with his head. "Now." They moved, swift and quiet, stepping only when the drone's sensors passed. Each step sent vibrations through the metal floor, but Caleb's weight shifted just enough to shield Mira. Her alloy cane tapped rhythmically, masking their presence, turning their movement into part of the station's mechanical heartbeat. Halfway to the other end of the corridor, an alarm sounded, a sharp, piercing note. A new voice joined the automated warnings. "Unauthorized personnel detected. Proceed to nearest decontamination pod immediately." Mira's breath caught, she froze. Caleb's hand gripped her arm. "Keep moving, don't stop." They ducked into a side tunnel just as a drone passed, its sensors sweeping past the empty corridor. Caleb's face was set in a mask of focus, but Mira could feel his pulse racing. At the end of the tunnel, another bulkhead blocked their path. This one was older, reinforced, but mechanically simpler. Caleb assessed it quickly. "Old maintenance hatch. We can get through it, but it's vertical," he said. "Ladder 20 feet, you'll have to follow carefully." Mira swallowed hard. Vertical shafts had always been her weakness. No depth perception, no sight. but the cane felt solid in her hand, and Caleb's presence was a tether she could trust. One by one, they climbed into the shaft. Caleb went first, testing each rung, ensuring it could bear their weight. Mira followed, tapping her cane against the shaft walls, mapping the distance and the metal rungs with her fingers. Every inch was a challenge, but she moved with determination. Serena, the lieutenant who had followed them from the concourse, was last. Her blue skin was smeared with blood from a shrapnel wound, and each movement was painful. Caleb reached back to steady her. "We don't have much time," he whispered. The vertical shaft led them to a horizontal tunnel, dimly lit by emergency strips. The air was cooler here, cleaner. Mira's cane tapped the floor with a crisp rhythm, guiding them as they moved. Caleb scanned ahead constantly, calculating their path, timing their movements to avoid detection. Then the unexpected happened, a sudden hiss from above, and a white vapor began to drift down through the tunnel. Caleb realized immediately the sterilization gas had been deployed. "Cover your mouth," he shouted, pressing his makeshift collar over Mira's face to filter the air. Serena stumbled, the blood from her leg soaking into the floor as she struggled to move. Mira's fingers found a seam in the wall, a small vent that led to an alternate passage. "Here," she whispered, "we can use this." Caleb inspected it quickly. "It's tight, but it'll bypass the main corridor. Lead the way." They crawled through the vent, the white vapor swirling below them. Each inch was a battle against panic, against the fear that the gas might reach them. Mira's alloy cane scraped against the metal, a constant reminder that she could still touch the world, that she still had control. Finally, they emerged into a storage compartment. It was small, cramped, but safe for now. The alarms outside were distant but constant. Caleb checked their surroundings. Medical supplies, emergency rations, and some old equipment lined the shelves. It was enough to give them a momentary respite. Serena sank to a bench, her hand pressed against her thigh to stem the bleeding. Caleb quickly tore a strip from his coveralls and bound her wound with precise, practiced movements. Mira explored the space with her hands, running along the insulated walls. "It's quiet," she said softly. A small laugh escaped her, tentative, fragile. For the first time in months, she felt a moment of calm. Caleb nodded. "We need to plan the next move," he said, scanning the schematics in his head. "The service shafts connect to the outer evacuation points, but the station's tracking system has tagged us now. Every second counts." Mira straightened, her cane in hand. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. Suddenly, the storage unit's lights flashed red. A siren wailed, mechanical locks clicked, and the automated voice echoed through the compartment. "Contamination detected. Quarantine protocol initiated." Mira froze, her fingers tightening around the cane. Caleb's jaw clenched. They were trapped. From the vent above, thin wisps of white vapor began to descend into the room. Caleb's hands moved frantically across the control panel, but a new problem appeared. Someone, or something, was already inside, overriding the station systems. Their fate was no longer just about escaping the gas. Someone wanted them caught, deliberately. The white vapor seeped into the storage compartment, curling along the metal floor like icy fingers. Caleb pressed himself against the wall, hands flying over the control panel. Every second mattered. The automated systems were locking them in, sealing the vents, initiating sterilization. If the gas reached them, it would burn their lungs and overwhelm their bodies in minutes. Mira clutched her alloy cane, its polished surface slick with sweat. Her fingers traced every ridge and seam of the walls, mapping the small room as her ears strained for any sound that didn't belong. The hiss of a vent, the mechanical whir of a drone, the metallic footsteps of an intruder. Then Caleb's eyes narrowed. He wasn't just fighting the gas anymore. Someone was manipulating the station's systems remotely. A skilled hand, human or alien, was overriding security protocols, watching their every move. "Whoever this is, they know we're here," Caleb muttered, his voice low, tense. "We're being hunted." Mira's pulse quickened. She had survived months in the vents, hidden from everyone, but this was different. This was no patrol. This was deliberate. Someone wanted them caught. A soft whir announced the presence of the first intruder. Caleb's head snapped toward the door as it hissed open slightly, a shadow slipping inside. Serena reacted instantly, pulling her rifle even with her injured leg, but she stumbled, the pain flashing across her face. The figure emerged, tall, precise, clad in the black uniform of the station's security command. A helmet concealed most of the face, but a pair of glowing eyes betrayed intelligence and determination. "Step aside," the intruder commanded, voice mechanical but carrying a sharp authority. "Your unauthorized presence in Section C violates protocol. Stand down." Caleb didn't move. He placed himself between Mira and the figure. "No, not until she's safe," he said, his voice steady but full of warning. The intruder raised a hand and a scanner blinked toward Mira. The blind girl stiffened, instinctively raising her cane. Caleb glanced at her. "Don't let them touch you," he whispered. The intruder's steps were deliberate, methodical, closing the distance. Serena gritted her teeth, shifting to cover them both, rifle raised. "This is between us and me," Caleb said quietly, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. The intruder paused, scanning Caleb's face and then Mira. "A child with no sponsor, an unauthorized mechanic. This is not acceptable," the voice said, harsh and unwavering. Mira's grip on the cane tightened. She could feel Caleb's pulse, his tension radiating through the small space. She realized that they were outmatched physically, technologically, but not morally. Their humanity, their courage, was the edge they had. Caleb's mind raced. The intruder was trained, equipped, but there were weaknesses here. Every automated system had a blind spot, every scanner had latency, every officer relied on procedure over instinct. He glanced at the terminal. The sterilization system can be overridden manually, but only from the main service junction. The intruder stepped closer. "Override attempts detected. Cease immediately or you will be neutralized." Mira swallowed hard, fear rising, but Caleb's hand rested on her shoulder. "Trust me, you can help," he said, a flicker of reassurance in his eyes. Her fingers trembled along the cane. "How?" "You can listen," Caleb said simply. "Guide us. Hear the vibrations, the movements. Help me navigate without being seen." Mira's heart pounded. She had always survived on sound alone, but this was different. This was high-stakes, life-or-death survival, but she nodded. There was no choice. Caleb moved to the terminal, hands flying over the keys, while Mira shifted silently beside him. Every tap of her cane, every subtle movement she made was calculated, feeding him vital information about the floor, the walls, and the approaching intruder. The intruder's steps grew closer, then paused as though sensing something. Caleb froze mid-command. A second intruder appeared from a side corridor, and Mira's fingers brushed against the metal wall, feeling the vibrations of their boots. "Two of them," she whispered, voice low but clear. "One tall, one light. Patience now." Caleb's mind raced. He needed a distraction, something to buy them a few crucial seconds. He grabbed a nearby tool from the shelf, a polished metallic rod similar to Mira's cane, and tossed it to the far side of the compartment. It clattered across the floor, echoing loudly. The intruder's sensors shifted toward the noise. Caleb seized the moment, typing furiously on the terminal. Lights blinked, vents hissed. A whir of machinery sounded above as a secondary vent opened, releasing a burst of pressurized air. "Go," Caleb shouted. Mira felt his hands guiding her toward the vent. Her cane tapped, mapping the opening, leading her safely into the air duct. Serena followed, grunting in pain as Caleb assisted her. The intruders lunged for the terminal, but it was too late. The burst of air from the vent knocked them off balance, sending them scrambling. Caleb yanked the panel open, overriding the local security lockdown, just enough for them to slip through. Inside the vent, the air was tight, confining but clean. Mira crawled carefully, following Caleb's instructions, her ears alert for every mechanical sound. The sterilization vapor hissed below them, seeping into the corridor they had just escaped. They moved quickly, silently, until the vent opened into a narrow maintenance ladder. Caleb paused, listening for pursuit. The intruder's footsteps were distant now. "Up," he said, glancing at Serena. She nodded, pain etched across her face, and they climbed, one by one, toward the final exit. Mira's heart raced as she emerged into a dimly lit service corridor above the quarantined sector. She tapped her cane against the floor, mapping the space instinctively. Then a mechanical voice boomed overhead. "Unauthorized exit detected. Security teams inbound." The sound echoed through the corridor, bouncing off the metal walls. They weren't safe yet. Caleb pressed his hand to her shoulder. "Almost there. Keep moving. Trust the path. Trust me." They sprinted down the corridor, each step a battle against exhaustion, fear, and pain. Serena's limp slowed them, but Caleb's steady hand and Mira's unerring sense of direction carried them forward. Ahead, they could see the faint glow of an emergency exit, the light of hope in the darkness. But as they reached it, another figure appeared, an officer flanked by drones blocking the path forward. Caleb cursed under his breath. There was no turning back now. The officer raised his hand, signaling the drones to fire. "Stop, now." Mira's cane tapped sharply against the floor. Caleb clenched his fists. Their fate hung by a thread, and the next moment would decide who lived and who died. The officer's voice echoed in the narrow corridor, his tone cold, detached. "Stop, now!" His hand was raised, signaling the drones behind him to power up. The whirring of the mechanical units filled the air, their sensors locking onto the small group. Mira's heart pounded in her chest, each beat a drum of impending doom. She had no sight to guide her, no way to predict what was coming. But she could hear the tension in Caleb's breath. She could feel the subtle shift in his posture. "Caleb," she whispered, barely audible. Her voice trembled, but there was no time for fear. "What do we do?" The officer's hand lowered, and the drone's weapons hummed to life, their metallic eyes glowing red. Caleb's eyes flicked back to Mira, the briefest moment of uncertainty crossing his face. But it was gone as quickly as it came. He wasn't going to back down. Not now, not when they were this close. "Stay close," Caleb muttered. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small device. "I need to buy us time. When I say go, move." The officer's cold gaze didn't waver. "You're not going anywhere." His voice held the finality of death, as if he were already writing their fates in stone. Caleb's fingers danced over the small device. A flash of blue light emitted from the screen, a signal. Caleb looked back at Mira and nodded once. "Now," he whispered. In that instant, Caleb threw the device to the ground. It emitted a sharp, blinding flash of light, followed by an electromagnetic pulse that rippled through the station's systems. The drones staggered, their sensors flickering wildly as their control systems overloaded. "Move," Caleb shouted, and in the same breath he grabbed Mira's wrist, yanking her forward. The officer yelled, but his voice was drowned out by the crackling of disrupted electronics. His drones spun in place, unable to track their targets. Caleb pushed forward, guiding Mira through the confusion, his voice steady despite the chaos. Serena limped behind them, her face pale but determined. Every step was agony for her, but she gritted her teeth and kept moving. They reached the door at the end of the corridor. Caleb yanked it open, and the sudden rush of air from the outside world hit them, cool and sharp. But before they could cross the threshold, the officer recovered, his voice slicing through the sound of their hurried footsteps. "Stop them," he barked, his voice laced with venom. Two more security officers emerged from the shadows, guns raised. The air around them crackled with tension. Mira felt a chill run through her. Caleb hesitated, his hand on the doorframe, but then a voice interrupted. "Wait." It wasn't an officer, it wasn't a drone, it was something else, someone else. A tall figure stepped out from the shadows, his voice cutting through the standoff like a blade. "Let them go." The officer who had been giving orders froze. "What? Who are you to give orders here?" The newcomer's eyes glinted with something dangerous. "I said let them go." Caleb's breath caught. The newcomer was clad in dark armor, but his stance was aggressive. No, it was something more calculated. This man was someone who had power, someone who could sway the tides of the conflict with a single command. "Are you in charge of this mess?" Caleb asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned to the officer. "You're dismissed. Get your men out of here." There was a tense silence. The officer's eyes flicked between the newcomer and Caleb, clearly weighing his options. Finally, with a sharp exhale, the officer gestured to his team. "This isn't over," he muttered before retreating, his footsteps echoing in the corridor. As the officer and his drones disappeared, the newcomer turned toward Caleb and Mira. His expression was unreadable. "You're lucky I'm not part of this station's security division." Caleb's grip on Mira's arm loosened slightly, but his gaze never wavered from the man. "Who are you?" The man gave a brief, humorless laugh. "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that you get out of here." Mira stepped forward, her cane tapping lightly against the floor. "Why help us?" The man's gaze softened for a moment. "Because you're not supposed to be here, and the station can't be saved if it doesn't learn how to be compassionate again. Caleb blinked, confused. What's that supposed to mean? The man's eyes met Caleb's, and for a moment it seemed as if the weight of the world was in those eyes. It means you're fighting a war that most people can't even see, but it's a war we all need to win. Mira could feel the weight of his words, even though she couldn't fully understand them. The idea of a war she couldn't see, a battle fought in shadows in the places people ignored. It was unsettling, but it resonated. The man turned, looking at the door that led to the outside world. Go, now, you're not out of danger yet. Without another word, Caleb stepped forward, pulling Mira along. Serena, despite the pain in her leg, followed closely behind. The door slid open automatically, and the cool air of the station's exterior hit them. They were free. For now. As they stepped out into the cold, sterile environment beyond the station's walls, Caleb glanced back one last time. The man in the armor had disappeared, blending into the shadows as though he had never been there. Just as they started to move toward the next section of the station, a loud voice crackled through the speakers above them, the mechanical tone of the announcement ringing ominously in their ears. Unauthorized personnel have bypassed all security protocols. Lockdown protocol is now active. All personnel will be detained. All exits are sealed. All access to the surface is restricted. Caleb's heart sank. The escape was over, but the real challenge had just begun. The announcement's echo reverberated through the station's exterior platforms, metallic and sharp, cutting through the cold night air. Caleb's jaw tightened as he scanned the horizon. Every exit was sealed. The sterilization countdown still ticked somewhere deep inside the station. Mira's grip on her alloy cane tightened. She could hear the faint hum of distant ventilation systems, the clatter of machinery, life beneath the station that was unaware of the unfolding chaos above. Her fingers traced the metallic floor, mapping the platform with practiced precision. "We're trapped," she whispered, voice trembling though her tone carried determination. "They'll catch us." Caleb's eyes flicked toward the massive station core rising above them, an intricate lattice of conduits, catwalks, and glowing panels. It was alive, humming with energy and systems, both protector and predator. He glanced at Serena, whose blue skin was streaked with dried blood, the strain of her injury visible in every motion. "No," Caleb said firmly. "We're not trapped. We just have to think like the station, understand it, move with it, not against it." Serena groaned softly, pain lancing through her leg as she adjusted her stance. "We can't outrun the lockdown protocols, Caleb. Every path we take is monitored, recorded. Whoever is behind this, they've anticipated every move we could make." Mira stepped forward, her cane tapping sharply against the metal. "Then maybe they haven't thought about everything. They can't feel, can't think like we do. Humans, people, we adapt." Caleb looked down at her, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "Exactly, and you've already survived months alone in this station. That gives you an edge." Above them, the station's command grid flickered, shadows moving across the vast platforms like dark fingers. A new presence emerged. Lieutenant Commander Varl, the shadowy figure who controlled the station's security division. Unlike the cadets and officers they had evaded, Varl was not a simple enforcer of protocol. His reputation preceded him, ruthless, calculating, and merciless. "You're out of your depth," Varl's voice boomed from the station's intercoms, amplified and distorted. "Unauthorized personnel detected. You cannot leave this station. Resistance is futile." Caleb gritted his teeth. "We're not resisting, we're surviving." Varl's laugh was low and mechanical. "Survival? You humans think you are clever, but the station sees everything. Every corridor, every hatch, every breath you take is logged and cataloged. You are already marked." Mira's hands trembled on her cane, but she lifted her chin. "Maybe we're marked, but we're not powerless, and we're not alone." Serena's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if there's someone else helping us. Who?" Mira didn't answer. She could feel it, the vibrations of movement through the station's steel and pipes, subtle, almost imperceptible. Not drones, not officers, something human, something guiding them, watching over them, giving them tiny advantages in the chaos. Caleb's mind raced. "If we can reach the auxiliary maintenance shaft, bypass the main decks, we can get to the outer evacuation pods, but Varl mustn't anticipate it. We have to be invisible, unpredictable." The platform beneath them vibrated slightly, a distant tremor, maybe a warning, maybe a signal. Mira placed her cane on the ground, testing the metal vibrations. There's a path through the lower conduits. I can guide you, but it's narrow. One wrong step and we're done. Caleb nodded. Do it, lead the way. The trio moved carefully, Mira's cane tapping a rhythm on the metal, guiding Caleb and Serena through the maze of platforms and catwalks. The wind from the station's massive turbines whipped past them, carrying the metallic scent of the station's core. Lights flickered and shadows shifted, creating illusions of corridors that weren't there. Then a sudden alarm cut through the night, a piercing shriek unlike any previous warning. The station's automated systems had detected an anomaly. Varl's voice rang out again. Intruders detected in auxiliary conduits. Lockdown escalation initiated. You have 10 minutes before full sector quarantine. Caleb froze for a fraction of a second, heart pounding. 10 minutes, we have to move faster. Serena gritted her teeth and leaned on Caleb's arm for support. I don't know if I can. You can, Mira interrupted firmly. You have to, there's no other choice. They pressed forward, ducking under pipes, climbing over catwalk supports, following the vibrations and echoes that Mira deciphered with uncanny precision. The drones buzzed above, sweeping the corridors, but Caleb used every tool, every improvised device in his satchel to jam their sensors temporarily. Finally, they reached the entrance to the auxiliary shaft, a narrow, vertical ladder leading toward the outer pods. Caleb glanced at Mira. You go first. She nodded, taking a deep breath. Every rung felt solid under her hands and feet, the tapping of her cane against the metal wall guiding her. Caleb followed, steadying Serena as they ascended. Halfway up, a sudden flash of red light illuminated the shaft. The drones had discovered them. Hold on, Caleb shouted, bracing himself. Mira gripped the ladder tightly, her knuckles white, her heart hammering in her chest. Serena groaned but continued, leaning on Caleb's shoulder. Above them, a mechanical whir grew louder. A drone hovered at the shaft's entrance, weaponized and scanning. Caleb's mind raced. There was no room to fight, no space to maneuver. But he had an idea, an improvisation, a risk. He whispered to Mira, when I say now, drop the panel cover from the maintenance hatch. It will block the sensors for just enough time. Mira nodded, trusting him. Now, Caleb shouted. The panel clattered down and the drone's sensors flared, confused by the sudden obstruction. Caleb pushed Serena up, then hoisted Mira onto the final rung. They emerged into the outer pod corridor, gasping for air, the hum of the sterilization systems below them fatting. For a moment, it seemed like they had made it. Then a voice crackled through the overhead speakers, icy and deliberate. Congratulations, Caleb Vance. You have survived the first stage, but the station is alive, and so am I. Your trial is not over. Mira froze, her cane tapping instinctively against the floor. Caleb's jaw tightened. Serena's eyes widened. The shadow of authority had revealed itself fully. They were not just escaping the station, they were stepping into Varl's game. From the far end of the corridor, a door hissed open, and a figure emerged, tall, commanding, exuding authority and menace. The final confrontation was about to begin. The figure that emerged from the corridor was impossible to ignore. Tall, imposing, with an aura of authority that seemed to warp the very air around him, Lieutenant Commander Varl moved with calculated precision. His dark uniform gleamed under the corridor's lights, and the faint hum of embedded servos in his exosuit echoed with every step. You've come far, Varl said, his voice calm but carrying a deadly edge. Too far, in fact. You are not authorized to be here. The station does not tolerate insubordination. Caleb stepped forward, shielding Mira with his body. We're not here to defy you. We're here to survive and to protect this child. Mira's hand gripped her alloy cane tightly. She could feel every vibration of the corridor floor, every subtle movement in Varl's posture. Her breath was steady now, collected. Despite the fear, she understood something that Varl seemed to overlook. Humans, and even a blind girl, could adapt in ways a rigid system could not anticipate. Varl's eyes glowed faintly through his visor. You presume much. The protocols exist to preserve order, to maintain life, and yet here you are, risking everything for what? Compassion. Caleb's gaze did not waver. Yes, compassion, it's what makes us human, it's what makes life worth preserving. A tense silence hung in the air. The hum of the station's machinery was deafening, yet in that stillness, every small sound, Mira's cane tapping, Caleb's shifting weight, Serena's uneven breathing, echoed sharply. Varl extended his hand. Then prove it. Show me that human ingenuity and compassion can succeed where the station's rules fail. Caleb's mind raced. He had no weapons, no authority, and minimal time. But he had something Varl could never fully control: creativity, adaptability, and the trust of those around him. He gestured to Mira. Can you guide me through the auxiliary conduits to the control core? We can override the sterilization systems and prevent the lockdown from destroying anyone else. Mira's fingers brushed the floor, walls, and pipes instinctively. She understood every echo, every subtle vibration, and she nodded. I can do it. Serena rose to her feet, blood still staining her coveralls. I'll cover you, she said, her voice steady despite her injury. If Varl attacks, I'll hold him off. The three of them moved together, weaving through maintenance shafts, narrow conduits, and hidden service tunnels. Mira led them with uncanny precision, detecting patrol patterns, sensing drone vibrations, and anticipating Varl's attempts to intercept them. Every tap of her cane was a signal, a map, a warning. Finally, they reached the control core. Caleb approached the main terminal, quickly inputting override codes while Mira guided his hands to the correct interfaces. Sweat dripped down his face as he worked, fingers flying over the holographic keys. Varl appeared at the entrance to the core chamber, his presence looming. You think you can outsmart the station? He said, voice cutting like steel. Caleb did not flinch. We're not outsmarting it, we're showing it what it's missing: compassion, life, humanity. Serena stood firm, rifle ready, but she did not fire. She trusted Caleb and Mira. She had learned in the heat of their escape that strength was not always measured by weapons. With a final keystroke, Caleb initiated the override. The terminal blinked, systems hummed, and a wave of energy pulsed through the station. Lights flickered, alarms shifted from red to green. The sterilization countdown halted. Drones powered down, automated locks disengaged. Varl's visor reflected the cascading system's shutdown. For the first time, his posture faltered. He had not anticipated this. The collaboration between a human, a blind girl, and a wounded officer, all working in unison against his calculated authority. Mira stepped forward, her cane tapping on the metallic floor. Your tools can destroy, she said, voice ringing through the chamber, but they can also save. Compassion guides us when rules fail. A ripple passed through the station's monitoring systems. The message spread like fire, simple words, yet revolutionary: your tools heal. Varl remained silent, processing. The rigid hierarchy, the unbending protocols, the obsession with order, all challenged by three individuals acting with courage and empathy. Caleb placed a hand on Mira's shoulder. We did it, he whispered, but the weight of their actions was larger than any personal victory. They had shifted the balance of the station. Outside the control core, lights brightened across Orion's spaceport. Evacuation pods became accessible. Refugees, maintenance workers, and officers alike hesitated, unsure of what to do. But then, inspired by Mira's declaration, by the courage of those who had acted without protocol, they began to move. Aid was offered freely, ration packs handed out, medical kits shared. The rigid social order bent, if only slightly, to allow humanity and compassion to thrive. Varl retreated to the shadows, silent but watching. The station would never be the same, nor would he. Caleb turned to Mira, who stood taller now, her cane held like a banner. You saved more than yourself, he said. You saved them all. She smiled, a real smile this time, faint but genuine. We saved each other, she replied. Serena rested her hand on Mira's shoulder. Sometimes, she said, voice soft, it takes breaking the rules to save the ones who matter. The three of them emerged onto the outer platform, greeted by the cold light of Orion's artificial sky. The hum of the station continued, steady and alive, but there was a new rhythm now, a pulse of hope, trust, and shared humanity. Mira raised her alloy cane slightly, as if to signal a new standard, a new way forward. Around them, the station's inhabitants paused and watched. For the first time, many realized that order could coexist with compassion, that strength could be measured not in control, but in care. And in that moment, Caleb understood something fundamental. Humanity's greatest power was not the technology they wielded, not the systems they controlled, but the courage to choose empathy in the face of indifference. The storm had passed, but its ripples would continue to spread. The station had been changed, and so had they. As the crowd moved cautiously, whispers of the blind girl's words spread across the station. Your tools heal. Somewhere in the shadows, a new threat observed, intrigued, and perhaps challenged. The future was uncertain, but hope had taken root.